You're listening to Andy and Mary at Arcane Frequencies.
Today's topic is going to be trigger music.
Part 2. Here's an idea, Mary, that I've had on my list, which we've not even tried yet. We're very familiar with the concept of doing burst sessions with EVPs. That's where you start a recorder off, you mark down what time it is, importantly, and then you just ask a question, leave a gap, ask another question, leave a gap, and maybe only do three or five questions with a decent gap between them, and then immediately replay that back, see if you've got any EVPs that appeared in those gaps. What I was thinking of doing was doing the same sort of thing, but with music. So where we talked about interaction, we've mostly been talking about EVPs which we picked up after the fact, or equipment being triggered, which then we know straight away, but it doesn't really give us much in the way of more quantitative information. So perhaps we could try a burst session, but using a music trigger. So play a piece of music, stop, play another type of music, stop, and then maybe do that 3 or 5 times, and then see if we get any responses back from that.
I think that's a great idea, Andy. Yeah, I think we should try that. I mean, we have captured EVPs after we've played music, but we've not done it as a burst session. So
cool.
We'll
definitely do that in one of our future investigations and report back what we found.
Yeah, I think that's a brilliant idea. We'll do that.
Okay.
So here's a question for you, Andy, then. What's your view on live music versus
I've heard
music?
we've never tried it, so we've always stuck to recorded music because I can't play much in the way of instruments. I mean, I can play a recorder maybe, but I think that would scare everything off, including the rest of the team. So we need to find someone who's skilled, and I think we do have someone in our team who's quite good with the guitar. So maybe we can try it. But I've been hearing a lot of good responses people begin having from this, and I think that might be because it's further pushing that interaction, that kind of emotion behind the people doing the experiment. So the person playing the guitar is very into it, and anyone who's there listening, they're a lot more into it than if they were just listening to a recording. So it could be a factor that the interaction of the people in the room is helping increase the interaction with anyone who's also in the room. But also it could be a difference in the complexity of the audio sound waves which is doing it, potentially, because when you're playing audio from a speaker, there's a clip off, there's a reduction. You're not getting that sort of full timbre of the music, as opposed with a live guitar. You're hearing it live. That sound wave coming out of that guitar is leaving because of these strings vibrating and bouncing around inside the bass. So it's a different sort of sound as well. So I absolutely think we should try it at some point, but not with my recorder.
No. Not with your recorder. I can't play a recorder either, so I think we're safe there.
Can you play any other musical instruments at all?
No, I don't have a musical bone in my body.
Maybe you could sing. Maybe that would elicit a response.
No, it would definitely elicit a response. I'm not sure it'd be a good response, but it would definitely elicit a response. But yeah, live music, I think, is a very good topic, and I think it could lead us into the frequencies sort of subject as well. Also, there's different eras and different types of music that we could try playing. I know we have at locations before. Previously, you've played some Roman music.
Yeah.
Latin music.
When we play music, it's from a audio player which is filed into different centuries, but also types. There is a type of military and there's a type of civilian, and also there's a type of ambient background sounds, but we'll cover that another day. But then basically I work through the different centuries of music. So I've got music going back to the 1200s, which is pretty much Gregorian chant, and then we try different centuries and see if any of those have stronger responses than others, which helps us kind of fine-tune what we're actually doing with the experiment, but also what sort of calling out we're doing as well. specifically we know some of the history of the environment, that hit on a certain century, so some sort of 15th century chamber music is getting the REM pod going off, we can then look at any information we have on the history to go, who was around in the 15th century? We'll try a few names to see if that helps.
Yeah.
But the more you can add to that, the better, I think, because everyone has a taste. So even if it's 15th century, that's 100 years. And think how many different types of music have been in existence the last 100 years. Like at least three.
Absolutely. But yeah. Well, no, and no single person, no two people, should I say, has the same taste. Everybody has a different taste. Not only do you have the wide range of music in 100 years, you've got that personal taste for the spirit as
absolutely.
Well.
There are a lot of people who say that they like every sort of music, but in reality, that's not the case.
I was just about to say that I like every type of music, but awkward.
Oh dear. Even
anyway,
bagpipes.
Back to our subject.
So that's not liking them, it's tolerating. I can tolerate every type of music. It's different. Right. I like every type of music.
Right, point proof.
But also, if you're trying to elicit that sort of nostalgic familiarity, then it has to be familiar as well.
Yeah.
And I think that's where we get more. I think we get more results back from military music than anything else, because those military marches that were written in the 17th century are still being used by regiments today. There's such a broad span of time where people would recognise that music. Yeah,
you're absolutely right. Those military songs are being used today, and people would recognise them.
Exactly. Where you look at, ABBA or something, and then not everyone's going to know their full back catalogue.
No, certainly someone from the 1800s, if we played ABBA, they look at us strangely. I actually used a word, this is going off topic a little bit the other day, but when I was reviewing some footage, and we all say words that are familiar to us, and I used a phrase of, well, if you think this is alien to you, and I thought, gosh, they might not even know what alien means. We were in Wimmering Manor, and they might not know what alien is. So there's a whole level of communication that we take for granted, that when actually you do need to be a little bit more careful with some of the words that
exactly. So certainly alien 100 years ago would have meant different, maybe even foreign, as opposed to extraterrestrial. So that makes a lot of sense.
Yeah. And even when we were at Wimmering Manor, one of the words that came out on the SB7 was when you were using one of your radio wave pieces of equipment, and it came out as magic. They don't recognise some of the tools that we use to try and communicate with them. So in terms of music, it's going to be so varied. But we do need to try and narrow it down in terms of going to the location, trying out these experiments that, and sort of review it once we've reviewed the footage, sort of building on those experiences.
Yeah, I think drilling down is the key to this, to really understand how it's having an impact. So maybe one other experiment we could try is having a control. So to work out if it's the music which is causing that triggered response, or if it's our interaction with the music and therefore then our interaction with whoever's there, perhaps we could have a completely separate area of the location which isn't going to be used by any team, play some different music just kind of on like a playlist throughout the night, maybe with a bit of gap between each track, and just leave it completely locked off with a recorder, and then see if anything happens there without that human factor. Because when we've been to the experiment, it's always with people there interacting with it. Just building on that, you have specific recordings with trigger questions. Maybe just to build on that, you could have the music playing, a gap, and then maybe a trigger question to ask that if they enjoyed it, and that might help elicit an EVP. Yeah, have it in a locked off area, because then that would be a really good control. Let's stick that one on the list as well. Okay, writing it down now. Yeah, so we'll pick maybe a different night to do that experiment, and report back how that works out. But I think that is a good way of building a control for this.
Do you think there's certain locations that we could try that at?
It's a good question. This is not something we've touched on, but it's an important point, and that is when you actually do this experiment, you have to make sure it's the right location. We mentioned forts quite a lot, but one of the major things you need to take into account with forts is the audio contamination. So big stone walls, long corridors, any sound carries a long way. If you're playing marching band music, then that's going to be heard throughout the entire fort. You kind of have to be a little bit careful about where you do it to make sure that you're not then having other people hearing music and expecting it to be paranormal. So part of that is communication, so that people know that that's going to be going on, but also very specifically picking the right room or right environment to do it in, so it's not going to affect the rest of the investigation. Forts for this one probably is not the best, because you wouldn't be able to then make sure that it's not distracting and disrupting other people. So maybe this is more of a manor house type thing than a fort type thing.
Maybe somewhere that you could have, like you say, a locked off room that's far away from the other investigations that we're doing, so that there isn't any.
Yeah, something that still has some soft furnishings to absorb some of the sound rather than just bounce it for hundreds of feet.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, but for the sake of a control, we do need to try doing that in a fort as well. That's the problem. It's got to be the right fort.
Yeah, absolutely. With forts, especially Fort Pembroke, EVPs there is really strong. And I don't know why, but it seems to be really strong there for EVPs. I don't think it's noise contamination, because normally when there's only a few people in that area, maybe it's to do with the environment. So again, maybe we can find a way of locking off an area and maybe communicating with the rest of the team that this is what's going to be happening. But yeah, one to think about.
Yeah, absolutely. I have done a couple of short lock-off experiments with some trigger audio, not music yet so much. But I try and pick in times when people aren't really investigating, so start of the night or when everyone's having a cup of coffee. But we do need to plan ahead to work out when you do that for a long period of time.
That's something to add to the list then.
Building up quite a list today. So
we are.
When we've been doing these experiments, Mary, what have you found has worked as an actual process of doing it?
Yeah, I mean, we've played music in various locations, and in terms of technique, as we've already said before, you can have music playing all night long, or you can play a long piece of music and try and get involved and see whether the equipment goes off. But what we have found success with is actually where you play some music and then you stop the music suddenly. We've actually captured EVPs once you've stopped the music. That has provoked a response, and I think it was actually more we got their attention at the time. So I think that's been quite successful. Definitely playing music so that it attracts spirits to us or gets their attention. I think that is definitely a really good way of doing it. And also if you think about playing music, or you have a rhythm and suddenly it stops halfway through,
it's like
be a
when
little
you
bit
hear
annoying.
Music on a radio on the way to work, and you get out of the car before you've finished hearing the end of it. That song is just stuck in your head for hours.
Yeah, or you've got a rhythm and it doesn't finish properly, and everybody likes it.
All right.
The tune or something.
A bit like musical
finished,
chairs. Just sudden abrupt stops, and then it's like, what are we going to do now?
yeah. What do I do? So that technique is, I think, has proven successful for us, because we've actually captured some EVPs. In fact, again, Pembroke, we actually had a disembodied voice. It was a voice saying hello. That for me was some music getting someone's attention. Yeah.
In fact, now I recall, there was one experiment we did, which was in Fort Whitley, I think actually it was, where we were playing the music and we were getting some responses on our air pressure sensor, and then we stopped, and then because it wasn't really kind of continuing, we were trying something else, and I put my musical player with a speaker connected to it in my pocket. And the one I'm using, or I used to use anyway, I've changed now. The one I used to use, it was annoying because it used to lock like really quickly after you'd started playing, like a few seconds. And so if you want to then stop the track and do that technique of stopping the music abruptly, you need to press another button and then an up, and then it would unlock and you can then do that. But when you'd finished playing the music, it would lock and then it would switch off. So I put it away in the pocket, and then after a little period of just doing calling out, it started playing again in my pocket, which I cannot explain to this day, because to play it, I have to get out, hit it on, unlock it, then hit play on the track. That was odd, or just an amazing set of coincidences that bashed around my pocket and then made it play. But either way, we then continued with the audio experiment, and we were getting a lot more hits, including someone's torch burning out and then going back on again, and there was all manner of different things. But I think the music definitely was a factor in that particular session.
We have been there a few times and we have played music, so maybe now they recognise us and they want to play music. So maybe that was part of them sort of saying, play some music, I want to hear it. Like you say, it could be a coincidence, but I mean, everybody that does investigations that has their own recorders knows that actually it takes a lot of effort to move the buttons, to take it off hold, take it off lock. We have it on lock for a reason, so that doesn't happen.
It certainly was interesting. And the fact that it kind of quietened off on the music front and then started playing again, and then afterwards we were getting more interaction from the music again. It seemed like it was a factor.
Pembroke is really strong for that, and we've been there a few times and played some really good music. And even in Fort Widley, it seems to work really well as well.
There was a time as well, I recall, in Northwood House on the Isle of Wight, where we're in the servants' quarters. It'd been a very quiet session, and we've been sort of sitting in this corridor, decked out everywhere with different sensors to see if there's any changes, and then we're doing some sort of calling out, discussing kind of who used to live in the servants' quarters, and if the people who also lived in the house were good to work for. And we were just trying to make some sort of connection there. And it wasn't until we started playing some of the chamber music, the kind of late 19th century chamber music, that I was hearing that these footsteps, and it sounded like they would get moving around the room, in the room literally right next to where we were, almost like something was, I wouldn't want to say dancing around the floor, but it's only kind of moving quite quickly. And then that disappeared, and then we heard footsteps coming up the corridor straight towards us, and nothing after that at all. But that was the only thing that really triggered any activity for us in that entire session, was just when we just put on the chamber music.
But again, that sounds like where you've played the music, it's attracted them into your area. It's almost sort of grabbed their attention. They weren't
interested in us, talking to them, but then they were interested in the music.
Sometimes, let's face it, sometimes we don't always want to talk. Sometimes we just want to listen to the music, don't we? So again, who's to say that isn't the same in the afterlife? And
you also got to think that some of these locations which we go to, they have people going to them twice a week easily and asking very much the same questions. So you have to be really careful, and we'll cover this another time, but you have to be really kind of careful with what you're doing. So sort of bringing something a little bit different, bringing kind of the music along and trying to use that at least is something largely new, I think, that they might not have experienced previously.
Yeah, I mean, I've seen it on a few shows and a few other groups that do it, but not everybody does it, I would say. Yeah,
and as we come back to the point of interacting with yourself as well. So I know sometimes we've done it and people have got so involved with it, they've been dancing and singing along to the music, and they've been very interactive sessions. We've been doing that, and I think that's also something which we've tried, which I don't see a lot of actually properly getting involved with it. I think I saw a Ghost Hunters TV show where they put on an orchestra because of the person was meant to be some sort of conductor. So it is done out there, but I just don't think it's really something that people don't try quite often. They don't take it out of their kit box that much.
Interacting is definitely important, and we may have covered this at the beginning, but if you've got a group of people, nobody wants to dance on their own, do they? So if you've got a group of people and you all have a little bit of a jig and you're dancing away, and it raises the energy, which then increases the atmosphere and maybe the spirits interaction as well, you know. Everybody likes a good party.
And energy can certainly be a factor. One thing in some of the locations where we get good responses from music, I tried to do is at the start of the night, just open with that. Just when we're kind of walking from your base camp out into the area of the building you're going to try and investigate, just play some music as you're walking along. Increase the energy levels of pretty much the building as you're going through it. That's been fairly successful as well, because that ups everyone else's energy levels as well as you're going along, because they start, you know, they're laughing and smiling and joking at it.
I wholeheartedly agree. I mean, when we were at Fort Pembroke and you went ahead of us and you were playing the military music in advance, it was very atmospheric, you know, very atmospheric. And I think it certainly raised the energy levels of everybody in the group, and it certainly attracted the attention of the
maybe
spirits
even
there.
got people in the same sort of mindset as whoever was there, just kind of got them to tune in a little bit more.
That's a good thought. That always works for a good investigation, is that yes, we like to enjoy ourselves and have a bit of a laugh, but if you're more focused on the investigation, then it makes for a better investigation.
Yeah, I mean, we'll cover that another time, but I think understanding the location and then trying to beat of that place is a very strong technique.
So Andy, I've had a thought. What about where we've captured actual music at a location? Is there any way that we can develop on that and play music to try and build on the music that we've captured? That is an
amazing idea. So I can think two of the off the top of my head. Well, one was at the Block, which is an old brew house in Burton-on-Trent, where we'd caught music inside the building, but the audio recorders we had outside the building and outside the room didn't capture it at all, and it's very clear on the recording. And also in Northwood House, where we picked up some music quite early on in the night, and we tagged it and we thought someone else had been playing it, but again then checked all the audio recorders around the building and it wasn't there. So perhaps that would lead quite nicely onto a trigger music experiment where you found some music which is very close to that song, or if you can actually find the actual music that was being heard, playing that as a trigger, I think that'd be very strong, because you already know that there's some sort of link to the building with that very particular sort of music, so you'd instantly be in tune. And where we need to go through a process to try and find something which has a good response, you will be able to start with something you know is going to be relevant. So that's a really good idea. It's just trying to find that sort of song. So you might have to find something similar, I think.
Yeah, you could use Shazam, so you could play the music back, find on the app, and find something similar.
That's a good idea. Weirdly enough, when we caught those, there wasn't much in the way of what song is this apps. So I think we need to revisit that one.
I think that also leads us on to another podcast about how technology is helping.
Good idea.
Content.
Progressive
That's
technology.
Another subject.
I can talk about my ASP32s.
Yeah. I'll add it to the list.
Thanks for listening to Arcane Frequencies. You can get in touch with us at contact@arcanefrequencies.co.uk.